very much, guys. Thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to be here for lunch. In just a second, they're going to bring the food out. Please feel free to enjoy your lunch while I'm talking. But I'm just warning you right now, I'm going to tell you a couple of war stories. I'll do my best not to gross you out. Is that okay? And Jack, just to answer your question, it's not that cool to be a master parachute, a free fall master parachutist. All you have to do is basically fall out of the back of an airplane and let the parachute take care of the rest. I have been following Tom around Texas for the last several years doing Toolbox events in Texas, and I'm a Georgia boy through and through, so I just want to say, Tom, thank you for bringing Toolbox to God's country. Thank you for bringing it here to Atlanta. Would you guys agree? Let me tell you a little bit about how I ended up in the Army, because I'm in high school. I have no idea what I'm going to do with the rest of my life, but I know I don't want to go to college. And I really don't have much of a future in a small farm community, so I make the fateful mistake of going to talk to an Army recruiter. Now, I blame all of this on my buddy Tony, because Tony was in high school, one of my best friends, and didn't even tell me before he signed up. But the next day he comes to school and says, Jeff, I just joined the Army, and you should join the Army too, because it'll be cool. Tony didn't tell me that the recruiters were going to give him some extra money if he could get his idiot friends from high school to sign up. So I show up in a recruiter's office while I'm still in high school, and I asked one question that would change my life forever. Maybe you guys have been there, and you're thinking, I don't know what the future holds, but I know that there's some nagging things that are going on in my life and in my past, and I've got to settle these things. And I'm in this recruiter's office, just me, 18 years old, just about ready to graduate from high school, and two different Army recruiters. And I asked them, what's the toughest job? And then there becomes an argument. One guy across the room starts to talk about the Army's Green Berets, and he's telling me how tough the Special Forces are. But the recruiter that I'm talking to says, Jeff, don't listen to this guy. The toughest guys in the Army are hands down Army Rangers that live and work right here in Georgia, in Columbus and in Savannah, Georgia. I don't know the first thing about Special Forces. I don't know anything about Army Rangers. So I asked this recruiter, what's the difference between Rangers and Green Berets? And he gives me this little lesson. I'll never forget what he said, because it's absolutely true. He said, Jeff, let's imagine that we were to take both groups to the Gateway Arch in St. Louis, Missouri. We take a Special Forces Alpha team, about 12 guys, put them in the bottom of the arch, and take a Ranger squad, about 10 guys, and put them in the arch. I keep walking around, and this microphone is fighting with this one. And we tell both groups to get to the top of the arch at the same time. Here's what will happen in St. Louis, Jeff. Those Rangers will do on the arch what they did in June of 1944 in Normandy, France. They'll throw grappling hooks over the top of the arch, and they're climbing hand over hand, just like they did those cliffs on Omaha Beach on D-Day. He said, that's what Army Rangers do, Jeff. But if you want to know about the Green Berets, they'll just run inside the arch because there's an elevator, and they'll hit the top floor and the elevator button. That's what Green Berets do. They work smarter, not harder. If you really want to be tough, you need to go to Georgia. So right after graduating from high school, I showed up. I went straight to Georgia. I went through infantry training and airborne training and volunteered to serve in this special operations unit. Now guys, I had a hidden objective, and I wasn't about to tell the recruiter because I was sure they would think I was crazy and they would not let me in the Army. I wanted to join this unit. I wanted to see if I was tough enough to serve at the best. But the real reason I'm in the recruiter's office that day is because I want to get shot at. And I want to know if I'm ready to die. And I'm not exaggerating. This happens, I need to go back in time just a little bit. So guys, I didn't grow up in a Christian family. My parents divorced when I was really young. And in my home, nobody went to church, nobody read the Bible, nobody talked about Jesus, they didn't pray. There was no presence of God anywhere in my family growing up. And when I was a little kid, I had this absolutely terrifying fear of death. I remember being in elementary school and thinking to myself, I know I'm going to die, all of us die, but I don't have the first idea what happens to you next. And for me, this was a paralyzing fear that wouldn't go away. So I'd wake my family up and I'd ask them these questions about where do you go after you die and what is it like, but they don't know any of the answers to those questions. And I really wrestled with this for years, until my family moved right outside of Nashville. And we were living in an apartment complex. And for whatever reason, the neighbors across the hall from us took me in and treated me like a little brother. They were a young married couple in their early 20s. They started spending time, they started hanging out with me, and then one night they came across the hall to my apartment. And they were acting really strange, but they said, Jeff, can we sit down and talk to you? There's something really important we need to talk to you about. And I thought I had done something wrong, or I thought they were mad at me. They sat down at the dining room table, and they started to tell me who Jesus was. For the first time in my life, somebody cared enough about me to tell me what happened on a cross 2,000 years ago outside of Jerusalem. And then they told me what sin was, and they described for me what Jesus did for me on that cross. And they made two promises that night. I'll never forget what they said. He said, Jeff, if you will surrender your soul to the Lord Jesus Christ, He will radically change your life right here, right now. It's called the abundant life, and you can read about it in John chapter 10, verse 10. But they said, Jeff, Jesus didn't just come to give you abundant life. He came to give you eternal life. And if you'll trust Him, you don't ever have to wonder what happens to you after you die. Man, I could not stop thinking about what that couple said to me. Later on that night, as I was laying in bed, their words were rattling around in my head and I couldn't get them out of it. And I just remember getting out of bed and kneeling down beside my bed, 13 years old. And I remember thinking, God, I'm sick of this fear and I don't want to worry about what happens after I die. God, I'm just asking you, would you change me? Would you take away this fear? Would you turn me into a new person? And the next day, something was so different inside of me that when I got off of the high school bus, instead of going to my apartment, I went to my neighbor's door. And I said, I prayed last night, and there's something really different inside of me. That's how significant this moment was for me. So when I'm in the recruiter's office, actually what I'm trying to figure out is, am I really over this fear of death? But you can't go talk to an Army recruiter and say, will you put me in war and let me get shot at so that I can figure out if I'm really ready to meet my maker? So I joined the Army. And as you heard, I'm in the Ranger Regiment. I've been in the unit for a couple of years, and the United States is about to invade the Republic of Panama. Now, I get notified about this invasion several days early. And on the night of December 20th, my unit, the Ranger Regiment, will kick off the invasion by conducting parachute assaults onto 2 airfields. We were going to put hundreds of aircraft in the skies that night, and there's a good chance that some of them might get shot down. And we needed a search and rescue force in case any of the aircraft went down. Like that Joint Strike Fighter that just crashed in South Carolina yesterday. So I loaded up on an airplane 24 hours before the invasion began and flew down to Panama to provide the search and rescue force for the whole invasion. For the next couple of days, we take down the airfield. This special operations force starts to take down the Panamanian military. The rest of the U.S. military rolls in there, and we start to take the country down. But the real reason that our force is in Panama, the mission inside the mission, is to go get the country's president, Manuel Noriega. Within about 2 weeks, we've got Noriega. We put him on an airplane, fly him back to the U.S. where he spends the rest of his life in a jail in Miami. Now guys, I got shot at a couple of times in Panama. But these really weren't kind of those life-threatening events that I thought, that's it, I'm not going to make it, tonight's the night. These are just one of those, it's really intense, it's high adrenaline, and then it's over a few minutes later. When I got back from the invasion of Panama, there was still a couple of things that I needed to figure out about myself and about my faith. But I do remember thinking to myself, if I didn't survive, there's one regret that I would always have, and that's not asking my high school sweetheart Dawn to be my wife. So as soon as I got back from the invasion, I went out and bought a ring and flew home and proposed. And Dawn and I set a date to get married a year later. And you've already heard from my introduction that I'm in Desert Storm, or at least I'm in the Special Operations Unit, and Desert Shield and Desert Storm are starting to spin up, and I'm just about ready to get married, just a few weeks away from the wedding day, which means we've taken care of all of the details, and this thing is now on autopilot when I get notified that we're going to deploy. Now, I'm in this clandestine unit. Everything that we do is secret. So I had to convince my boss to let me go across the street and call my fiance on a payphone. Does anybody in this room remember what a payphone looks like? I'm on this phone. It's not a secure phone line. And I say, Dawn, I can't tell you where I'm going. And I'm not authorized to tell you when I'm leaving, but I'm pretty sure I won't be in the country on our wedding day. And there's a long pause on the phone. All of the plans, all of the preparation, all of the money, right? She's thinking about it. And she says, Jeff, if you're going to go off to war again, we need to get married before you leave. You need to fly home so that we can get married right away. And I said to her, first of all, this isn't a secure phone line, and I never actually used the word war. I just said I'm not going to be in the country on our wedding day. To which she replied, don't play games with me, Jeff. If you get shot, I want the flag. We need to get married. That's how patriotic this woman is. And I ran back across the street, talked to my commander, convinced him to say yes, got back on the phone and said, yes, ma'am, I'll be there this weekend. And no exaggeration, I landed in our hometown at noon on a Saturday. We got married Saturday night, and I got back on a plane Sunday morning to fly back to Columbus, Georgia, so that I could head off to Kuwait. Now, guys, I got shot at in Kuwait too, but it's nothing like what happened to us in Somalia. Part of what I'm trying to describe for you is by the time I get to Somalia, I'm a squad leader. I've been in the Army for 6 years, and this isn't my first rodeo. I have been to war. I've been shot at. I thought I had an idea of what this would be like, but Somalia was far different than anything that I've ever seen, even Iraq or Afghanistan after it. We get sent over to Somalia, this very small special operations force, a very surgical force, and we go into the capital city of Mogadishu on this kill or capture mission. Now, the plan is to put these special operators in the city streets. We're going to take down this warlord and the high-ranking leadership of his clan because he's been targeting United States forces. He's been ambushing United Nations forces. He's actually been capturing the food that the United States and the United Nations are handing out. And he's been starving his own people into submission. Guys, let me remind you about this nation that we live in. The United States Marines didn't land on the beaches of Somalia in December of '92 for their oil. We're not over there for their land. We're not over there because they have anything to give us in return. We're over there because there was a drought which led to a famine. And by the time that we showed up, there were already around 300,000 people that had starved to death. So those Marines and the rest of the U.S. and UN forces, they're over there just to hand out a bag of beans and a bag of rice. And we're trying to keep a country that's literally dying of starvation alive for another day. When this warlord starts to use food as a weapon, this is how evil people are around the world. He starts to ambush food distribution sites. He starts to keep the food and threaten anybody who disagrees with him to starve them to death or else bow to his will. And in June of '93, Mohammed Farah Aidid and his Haber-Getter clan killed 24 United Nations workers at a food distribution site. We were out training in Texas when all of this happened. And the United Nations Security Council met together and said, we've got to bring this guy, Aidid, to justice. I'm telling you this because you don't send rangers and special operators overseas to hand out food. We go over there with a kill or capture mission. Go get Aidid, go take down the top-ranking leadership of his clan. So we stop all of the training, we get on aircraft, we fly over to Somalia, and we think this is going to be about a 6-week operation, 3 months in. And we've taken down a lot of big leaders in his clan, but we still don't have the number one guy, Aidid, and we still don't have a couple of his top leaders. That's when we get a tip on Sunday afternoon, October 3rd, that 2 of the high-profile leaders are in the same building at the same time. Up to this point, we've never seen 2 high-value targets in the same place at the same time. But there's a problem. This is the middle of the afternoon, and it's broad daylight. And throughout the decades, special operators only do business at night. When we go overseas, we live on what's called reverse cycle, which means we sleep during the day, and when the sun goes out, we go out and we do bad things to people, and we scurry back before the sun comes up. Nobody even knows that we're there. We live like vampires when we're overseas, basically. And now we got 2 high-profile bad guys in the same building, but it's the very part of town that's controlled by Aidid. It's nothing but guns and bad guys, and it's broad daylight. And all of us knew this ahead of time. When our big boss, Major General William Garrison, decides to launch the force to go get them. Now, just like you see in the movie Blackhawk Down, special operators fly in on Little Bird helicopters and they take down the target. Other Rangers from my unit go in on Blackhawks and they slide down ropes and they put protection around the target building, basically keep the rest of the city out of the building while those special operators are taking it down. And while all of that is going on, I'm leading a long column of Humvees through the city streets. The plan is that we'll show up with the Humvees about a half a block away from the target. And we'll get there about the moment that the Blackhawks are pulling off. We'll wait for the call that the building is secure, bad guys are in our control. We'll drive up the last half block, throw everybody from the helicopters and all of the bad guys in the vehicle, and we want to get in and out of the city streets in less than 30 minutes. That's the plan. But of course, nothing ever goes according to plan. You businessmen in this room know that. Anybody who's ever been to combat knows that. As soon as the first bullet goes over your head, the plan goes out the window and you just start to react. And when those helicopters are going in, and when the Rangers were sliding down the ropes, Todd Blackburn missed the rope and he landed in the city streets head first. So as soon as I showed up with the Humvees, I'm already getting a call from my battalion commander, Colonel Danny McKnight, saying, Jeff, I need you to get up here, get to Todd Blackburn, put him on the back of your vehicles, and take him back to the surgeon. He doesn't look like he's going to make it through the rest of this day. I had to fight my way up to get to Blackburn's position, and he had a couple of medics working on him, trying to keep him alive. He's already unconscious, bleeding from his nose and his ears. And I placed him on a cargo Humvee. It's like a pickup truck with no protection around him. And then I split my men in half and put half of my guys on a Humvee in front of them and the rest of my guys on a Humvee behind Blackburn. And we're going to provide the guns and the protection to get him out of the city and to get him back to the base. Now, we're already under gunfire. And it's far enough over our heads that I'm not that worried about the enemy fire right now. I'm more concerned about the potholes and the roadside bombs and about Todd Blackburn, who's in the Humvee behind me as we drive away. So I tell the guy who's driving my Humvee to go really slowly and avoid all of these potholes because I don't want to do further head and neck damage to the guy behind me. And when we turn the corner, I'll be gracious in my language because of this lunch conversation. The whole city erupted with gunfire on those 3 Humvees. All right, guys, I need you to understand that I'm on a road that is more narrow than this room right here. And we're driving at 10 or 15 miles an hour, and we are getting hit from every imaginable direction. It's coming from rooftops and alleyways and every window, every doorway, automatic gunfire from 20 feet away. There's rocket-propelled grenades going across both sides of the street. And while we're in that huge exchange of gunfire, one of the machine gunners on my Humvee, a guy by the name of Dominic Pilla, sees a Somali gunman hiding in the bushes waiting for us. And these 2 guys shoot and kill each other in the same instant. Now, the movie Blackhawk Down deliberately downplays this violence because that wound was massive, and it hit Pilla in the forehead. And he lost most of his head. He was actually dead before his body hit the floorboard. And everyone in those vehicles started to freak out because all of us realized we're all going to die in the next few moments. The guy in the back with Pilla laying in his lap starts to scream, Sergeant Struecker, Pilla's been hit, he's been killed. And guys, when I looked over my shoulder, it was like the whole back of that vehicle had just been painted red with his blood. And the only thing I could think of is, what is it going to take to get my men out of the city streets, get my men back to the base? It was a brutal fight just to get back there. And we're at the airfield where our unit is stationed. The medics are running to get my Humvee to pull Dominic Pilla's dead body off of it. And the surgeon is running to try to get to Todd Blackburn to see if he's still alive. Vehicles are all shot to pieces right now. And that's when my platoon leader, Lieutenant Larry Morris, walks up to me. And he says, hey Jeff, we just had a second Blackhawk helicopter go down. We've already put the search and rescue force in where the first Blackhawk went down, and now Mike Durant's helicopter has crashed, and we don't have anybody left. So Jeff, I need you to get back on the Humvees, and I need you to go out to the Durant crash site, and I need you to see if anybody is alive out there. This scene is very accurately portrayed in the movie Blackhawk Down. When he walks away, one of those special operators who came back with me, he pulled me off to the side. And he said, hey, Sergeant, don't go back out in the city streets tonight in all of that blood. Don't leave your men in that Humvee. That will really mess them up if you do that. You should probably go clean that vehicle up. So I wanted to spare my men all of the blood, all of the gore. I sent the rest of my guys, go get some more fuel, go get some more ammunition. I grabbed 1 or 2 of those Rangers with me, and we pulled this Humvee off to the side. I didn't have running water. I didn't have time to put on surgical gloves. I just used my bare hands and buckets, and I started to clean the blood off the back of this vehicle. And guys, I am not at all ashamed to tell you, this is the most terrifying moment of my life. There isn't even a close second. You see at the back of the Humvee, I start to think, this is a suicide mission. I don't know if anybody survived at the 2 crash sites, but the only guy from the entire force that was killed in action took a round in the forehead about 12 inches away from me. And if I drive the rest of my men, notice, I'm not so focused on myself, I'm concerned about the rest of my Ranger squad. If I drive my men back through that firefight, there will be 11 more body bags tomorrow morning. The first thought was my men. The second thought was about my wife. You see, we had been trying for 3 years to have a baby. And she got pregnant right before I left for Texas for training, and I get a letter in the mail in Somalia saying that she's already a couple of months along with our first child. And this very first thing that comes to my mind after my men is, My wife, I'll never see her again, and my child will never even know who their daddy is. And everything inside of me was saying, don't go back out there, Jeff. But guys, I need to tell you who these Rangers are and what they are willing to do for you and for your freedom. See, these guys get up every day and they literally swear their lives to one another. They pledge their allegiance to each other, and they pledge their willingness to do whatever it takes for our country. These Rangers literally say every morning that I will give my life up for my buddy. And they do it in what's called the Ranger Creed. One of the phrases of the Ranger Creed says, I will never leave a fallen comrade to fall into the hands of the enemy. And I'm at the back of this Humvee, and it starts to occur to me, if I go back out there, it is a 100% certainty my men are going to die. If I don't go back out there, I'm going to leave those men from the crash site out there, and they're going to die. There is no way that a lot of people don't die next. That's the only scenario that's going to happen. And I'm terrified. With every fiber of my being, I don't want to go back out in those city streets. And that's when I just simply started to pray. And I didn't even stop cleaning up the Humvee. I just said, God, I'm scared. God, I'm in trouble. God, I need your help. And while I'm at the back of that Humvee, I wish I could take every one of you there. I wish I even had the words to describe what happened to me. So I'm at the back of that Humvee, and I start to realize, Jeff, your life is not in your control, and it has nothing to do with what the enemy does next. Your life is in God's hands. And He will decide whether or not you live or you die tonight. It's not up to you, and it's not up to your enemies. But I also started to think about it in these terms. Listen, guys, I'm just a simple dude. And I'm at the back of that Humvee, and it becomes pretty obvious to me. There's really only one of two ways this thing can happen tonight. Maybe I survive. Maybe I'm able to go back home to Georgia. But if not, if tonight is the night before my body hits the ground, I know where my soul will go. I will spend an eternity with God in heaven. And that was the moment that I started to realize, either I go home to my family in Georgia, or I go home to my Father in heaven. No matter what happens next, I cannot lose. And it was like a light switch just got flipped. That was the instant that I was absolutely certain, I know I'm going to die, but I have no fear whatsoever, because I know what happens to me next. And guys, I didn't get on those Humvees once. I stayed on those Humvees all night long till 9 o'clock the next morning, taking casualties and fighting with those Somalis. I am the last vehicle to make it back into the base the next morning. And when I got off of the vehicles, some of my buddies were waiting for me, who said, Jeff, I watched you last night in the city streets. We have the same equipment, we have the same training. But there's something inside of you that you have that I don't have. Jeff, I could hear it in your voice over the radio. You have something, and I don't even know what it is, but I know I want that. And I got off the Humvees, and guys were grabbing me saying, I need to talk to you about what you believe, Jeff, because I saw it with my own eyes in the city streets. I heard it with my ears over the radio. I want what you have. And that is the moment that God set me on a path to become an Army chaplain, and eventually spend the rest of my Army career going back and forth to Iraq and Afghanistan 14 times so that I could stand with those warriors and tell them, I know what you're going through. And there is a world of difference when you go onto the battlefield with the Creator of the universe. In fact, one of the greatest warriors that ever lived, a poet who became the king of Israel, David said it this way, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. If you know this verse, what does he say next? I will fear no evil. And here's why. Not because I'm the baddest man on the battlefield. I will fear no evil because you go with me onto that battlefield, God. And if you're with me on that battlefield, what do I have to worry about? Guys, I didn't come here to glamorize war. I didn't come here to tell you how awesome I am. I came here to introduce you to the one that can give you supernatural peace when you're in circumstances way beyond your abilities. You see, some of you guys out there are going through it right now. Tom talked about it at the beginning of this lunch. Tough circumstances never last, but tough men do. And you may be going through it right now at work. You may be hanging on by your fingernails at home. Maybe it's your marriage. Maybe it's your children. Maybe it's your health. And you're saying, I don't know where to turn and I don't know what to do next because these problems are bigger than I can handle. I'm in over my head. I'm here to tell you that's the moment that the sovereign King of the universe can step in and can rescue you like he did me. And I'll also just put it in these terms. Listen, when you have settled once and forever your death and what happens to you next, when you have eternity nailed down, what on earth can happen to you here on this world that you have to worry about? Because you've just nailed down the most important thing. So what I want to do, this may be unusual for you, in just a second, I'm going to pray for you guys. I want to pray for some of the guys that are really struggling right now, some of the guys that are going through it right now, and you don't know where to turn, you don't know what to do next. I'm going to pray that this is a holy moment where you meet the sovereign creator of the universe. And he tells you, listen, I got you right in the palm of my hand, and you don't have to worry how things are going to turn out, because I'm going to take care of you. There are some strong men of faith in this room. And I'm going to pray that you go out of these doors so bold, you live so different, that your co-workers, your neighbors, your wife and your children say, I want what that man has. I believe that's what God is calling all of his children to do. That's the life God is calling all of us to live. So would you just bow your heads, and would you let me pray over you right now? Our great God in heaven, nobody came to this lunch by accident. You brought them here, and you didn't bring them here because you wanted them to hear a war story. You didn't bring them here because you wanted them to hear about Jeff. You brought them here because you wanted them to hear about Jesus. About the greatest man that ever lived, the sinless Son of God who was willing to leave heaven and come to earth and become a sacrifice to pay for my sins, but not just for mine, for any man who would turn to you in faith and radically trust you with their soul and with their future. And God, I'm praying that right now your Spirit is poking a guy in this room in the chest, and they're the kind of person that's been to church and they've heard about Jesus and they have kind of done what's expected of them in the past. They have done some good religious things. Maybe they're like me and really not sure, when I was a 13-year-old kid, whether or not they'll be with you. If tonight was their last night, they're not exactly sure where they'll spend eternity. God, would you cause some guy right here, right where they're sitting? I'm not going to embarrass them. I'm not going to call them out. But would you cause some guy to just surrender their soul to you right there, silently at their seat? May we cry out, God, forgive me. God, I'm a sinner. God, I believe you love me and you didn't want to leave me in my mistakes and in my past. So you sent your son Jesus on a suicide mission to rescue me. And today, God, I don't even understand all that this means. All I know is I am turning from my sin and I am turning to you for the first time, and you know my heart, God. So you know I mean it. God in heaven, would you hear that prayer from a silent heart? Would you honor that prayer? And would you do a miracle, the miracle of all miracles? Would you make somebody born again, give them new life right now, life at the soul and at the body level? And finally, God, I lift up to you my brothers, those warriors in this room who have been radically changed by Jesus. I'm talking about spiritual warriors. Would you send them out of these doors, ready to make an impact in their homes, in their neighborhoods, in their workplaces, so that people say, man, I don't know what it is, but you got something and I want that. God, would you be glorified by what you're doing in the hearts and lives of these guys in this room right now. And I pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen.